Good morning, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting of the Halton Police Board to order for Thursday, March 31st, 2022. First of all, welcome back, everybody. It's great to be back in person and see everybody's smiling faces around the table. Thank you for being here. But of course, we also are very pleased that two of our board colleagues who were able to be with us today are joining us through Zoom, our new favorite word after COVID, Zoom. Good morning, Clark. Good morning, Don. We're going to start out with Mr. Secretary. Do you have any requests this morning?
No, Mr. Chair.
Members of the board, are there any disclosures of pecuniary or conflicts of interest this morning? Not seeing any. Nobody on the screen? No. We have two sets of minutes that were circulated and are part of your agenda this morning. 1.3 reflects the minutes of the public session held on February 24th, as well as the workshop meetings on March 25th. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes? Thank you, Kurt. Seconded by. Thank you, Pav. Any comments, questions, errors, or omissions? Don, did I see your hand up for a question?
No. No.
Thanks, Magda. I'll ask, is there any, I guess I can call for a show of hands. That's the first time in a long time. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Thank you very much. Those are approved. We don't have any formal presentations or delegations this morning, and I'll draw your attention to Section 3, which is our consent agenda. On that, you'll find 5 items on that consent agenda. Would you like to separate those items, or are we prepared to approve them en masse?
I would like to address 3.2, please, Mr. Chair.
3.2, thank you. Anything else? 3.3 and 3.4. Okay, Don?
3.5.
Okay, let's just go through them one at a time then. 3.1 is Halton Happenings. Are there any questions on that?
Oh.
Okay, I knew it. Go ahead, Pav.
Actually, I was just interested in understanding, it says officers completed 2 crime prevention through environmental design inspections in the community, and I wanted to understand more about what that is. I've heard the term before, but I don't know what it is.
Well, I mean, generally, we call it SEPTED, but it's looking at properties and risks of properties and trying to design either residential or industrial business sort of properties so it's safer from crime, more protected. Sometimes it's simple things like removing bushes from basement windows, which might be an entry point, better securing front doors, deadlocks, compared to some of the cheaper locks on doors, locking doors. We've talked about that in the past, whether it's vehicles or houses. A lot of houses are left open. The doors are left open, so that's another issue. But it's really about, I guess the term we use sometimes is target hardening, but either of the deputies.
We offer this through our Community Mobilization Bureau. We have got people trained in SEPTED, and it is about target hardening. So if someone who has experienced a break and enter is offered that someone to come and look at their home and look for lighting, video cameras, things that would block a person's view of someone being seen breaking into a home. So it's a service that we offer.
Thank you.
Any further questions on this? Don, go ahead.
No, I have one under the traffic service unit under Halton Happenings.
Okay, go ahead.
May I proceed? Yeah, I was just curious and shocked at the same time to see the campaign, Toberary, I believe it's called, where there was 86 commercial vehicles inspected over a 3-week period of time, with 51 citations being issued. Those are very serious numbers. Is this a program, I hate to call it successful, but it is, contemplating repeating itself throughout the year? Chief?
Yeah, I'm sure through the chair, now that we've seen these sorts of statistics, the professionals that are doing that work will have an ongoing look at it. In very general terms, the tow industry throughout the province of Ontario causes police services and the public issues from time to time, whether it's with their vehicles and their own vehicles being unsafe, such as this, or other business practices, which cause us some concerns in different areas, more in camera than in public. But there are a lot of issues within the tow industry. Having said that, there are some extremely professional tow companies and tow providers, and so we want to also mention that. But there are certainly a number that fail the test.
Do we have a breakdown of independents vis-a-vis corporate towers?
I don't know that we have it for these statistics. We might be able to get that. Most of the tow companies are some sort of a company, some larger than others, and some are multi-jurisdictional. And it is a big money business where some are overcharging people and racing to tows, and you see all those sorts of things.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further on Halton Happenings 3.1? I'm not seeing any. Can I get a motion to approve? Thank you. Sorry, not approve, but receive. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Nav. I'll call the question now. All in favor of receipt? Thank you. Moving on to 3.2. That's been, well, they've all been separated. So who wanted to take on 3.2? That'd be Ingrid. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is certainly the heart and soul of the community, especially at these very challenging times. And I just wanted to get a little more information in terms of, when I read the report, it said in 2020, the consultations were deferred due to COVID, and we are now in the process of resuming the in-person meetings. How did that impact us when we were not able to conduct those consultations the way they were intended? And also, I have a question regarding the opioid side, in terms of how that is affecting us in Halton.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. The deferral for the 2020 year was for the opioid action table. This was a public health-driven action table in partnership with the police. Through the pandemic, obviously, they had to transition a number of their resources to COVID-related responses. And as a result, the greater collaborative work on opioids was deferred. However, concurrently, what we did is we worked with other stakeholders, the hospital, addiction services, and then through our community mobilization bureaus to better understand how opioids were impacting us, and also working with our investigative units to implement strategies for upstream interventions so that we could still address the opioid piece during the pandemic.
We know it's a serious issue in Canada. How serious is it in Halton?
Very significant. We're talking about lives here. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that people are in crisis. The pandemic has certainly exacerbated mental health pieces of that, and we are seeing a rise in the use of opioids. And we are doing our best right now with the resources we have to tackle this. Mm-hmm. We are getting a lot of traction with our hospitals and other public health entities to ensure that we are trying to move upstream about education, the issuance of naloxone to prevent those overdose deaths.
It's having a huge impact on the mental health crisis as well.
Absolutely.
With respect to depressions. The other question I have is the grant, the $330,000 grant that was received. How will that be put to use?
So I actually get to sit on the Halton Region Community Investment Fund. There's a certain amount of money allocated per year for 1 year and 3-year types of funding. This specific grant of $330,000 was given to ADAPT as part of the opioid strategy. The reality is it's trying to do programming for upstream pieces of intervention, and so that's education and awareness, trying to reach people in potentially institutions when they're coming out of, like Maplehurst, for example, the ability to connect with people and give them resources so they don't go right back to an addiction-based type of lifestyle.
Were we surprised to receive the $330,000, or was that anticipated?
It's actually something that, as a committee member, we elect to determine where that money is funded. So as you are an applicant for this type of money, you need to align it with our community and safety well-being plan, and it has to have a greater impact. So there's a panel of people that will look at the impact, the scope, and the sustainability pieces of that, and as a result, we will make a determination of where that money gets funded. So I think there's approximately $3.5 million allocated on an annual basis Some is reserved for those 1 year and in-year types of initiatives. Others are for protracted, like 2 or 3 year programs.
So with the pandemic winding down, we'll be able to reintroduce the person-to-person meetings, and they should yield some great results for the service.
And we already have.
Thank you.
And I think too, through the chair, it's interesting, Raj mentioned inmates that are getting out of Maplehurst, but it's an ongoing issue for us having overdoses and deaths due to fentanyl inside Maplehurst. And it's amazing, you might think it's a secure facility and people are locked in there and can't get out, but we're talking such minute quantities of this particular drug. There's amazing ways that people still get it inside the prisons. And so a lot of our cases are inside the jail, and it's a very large jail here, but we also have a lot throughout our community.
Tragic. Thank you.
Anything further on, yes, Don?
No, I just wanted to raise the question of, with the reported change in control at the Mexico-U.S. border, have you seen any change? Like, is there an uptick in the quantity of frequency of calls for drug-related, let's broaden it a bit, drug-related incidents in Halton? Do you think any of that has made a difference, or have you not seen a difference, really?
Yeah, it's, we've coming through the pandemic, but this is an epidemic, and it's, when it comes to opioids, of course, they can be manufactured in anywhere. It's not like a friend of ours with CBSA used to say, when you're dealing with cocaine, it didn't come from Canada, it was imported, so involved with CBSA. But a lot of these drugs now can be manufactured, and synthetic opioids, which are causing wreaking havoc. But we're also seeing huge quantities of cocaine. We've just last year, I guess we had the largest cocaine arrest ever here in Halton, and other drugs at the same time. So cocaine is massive still, regardless of what's happening at that border. It's such there's so many different ways for those large quantities to get in, with cargo ships, airplanes. Where there's a will, there's a way, as we know from the Colombian and the Mexican cartels.
Thank you, Chair.
Anything further on 3.2? Can I get a motion? Ingrid, would you give me a motion to...
So moved.
Thank you. And the action on this particular item is, I believe, receipt. Yes, it is receipt. Can I get a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Don, or Kurt. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Next up is 3.3, and Kurt asked us to separate that. So, Kurt?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I look at this as an important report. The response to incidents that result in use of force are issues, I think, that I'm sure you're very interested in, Chief, and others. And the good news is it's down a little bit in this report, but it's still up, significantly. It's over doubled, or more than doubled, since 2017. I know the last time we talked about this, we mused a little bit about, has COVID had an impact here, and I suppose that's possible. But do you have any thoughts you could share around it, and where you think it might be going, or so what other causes may be in addition to COVID?
Yeah, through the chair, I think there are a number of things that come into the statistics in this sort of report. Year after year now, 10 years in a row, I've been, I would say, relatively happy and satisfied with the level of use of force. And we don't have a lot of, another thing that's very important is we don't have a lot of incidents where there's a complaint of excessive use of force, which you may see in some different jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And when the Special Investigations Unit has enacted their mandate to look at where someone may have been injured as a result of use of force, there have been no outcomes from that. There have been no incidents where they've ruled that the officers acted improperly, or in that case, criminally. So I think that's another very good measure. But I think another thing that we're seeing around the province, and certainly we talked about this at the OACP level and various organized crime committees, is the really massive increase in firearms that are on the streets, guns and gangs issues. So where we see a lot of the violence coming from some of the GTA street gangs, and that includes Halton, certainly might be more based in Peel and Toronto, but they're coming here, and some of the shooting and the carjacking type of incidents. So it doesn't surprise me that with increased firearms on the street, there's going to be some escalation in the use of force in some of those incidents. There's a couple of other things that I think are interesting when you look at these reports. I almost question myself when I look at the last 5 years. I think between our batons and pepper spray, they've been used 10 or 12 times in 5 years. You almost wonder, are they worth having them anymore? They are a different option. So, you know, sometimes, or there might be a preference by an officer to use a baton or pepper spray instead of the conducted energy weapon. But the CEWs, the tasers, have definitely become sort of the alternate, less lethal use of force opportunity for officers to use. And I think that has really helped to keep our officers safe. And going back many, many years, we were one of the first police services boards to approve tasers for the use of all of our frontline officers. I believe in Toronto, they still do not have tasers in the hands of all frontline officers. They used to just have them with supervisors, and of course that's problematic if the supervisor isn't the person there at the call at the time that the violence is escalating. But I think this report also speaks to our frontline officers' abilities and capabilities to de-escalate situations and to bring it down. You'll see a number of times where various weapons are drawn or displayed but not used. That's all illustrative of the de-escalation in those cases. And the other thing, it will probably be a question, but the other thing I wanted to comment on is all police services have started to try to keep some race-based statistics when it comes to use of force. When we first looked at this report, it was shocking. When you just look at the numbers, but I remember from a number of my statistics courses and university programs, there's often statistics within statistics. Yeah. And it's when it goes from, just under 3% of our citizens in 2016 reported as being black. Right. And you had 34% use of force against a black member of the community. Most of those people, individuals, when we asked our use of force people to have a better look at it, were not from Halton. So they are some of the violent criminals that are coming from other jurisdictions here, which brings it down to 9% or 8.9% Halton residents. And then again, some of the gang members are living here. And we're also sending our tactical teams out to do guns and gangs types of arrest in other jurisdictions. So those statistics also show up because it's our members using force in those situations. And a lot of the, not surprising to me, a lot of the instances where firearms are displayed, it is our tactical team where they're dealing with the most violent takedowns and arrests. So that's some of my thoughts.
Well, thanks, Chief. I noticed that number 34, and I was very curious about it because it jumped out at me. Knowing the makeup of our population in this region, that number really stood out. So I'm glad that you commented on that. Mr. Chair, I'd like for the board to think about perhaps this report being reported as a discussion item going forward. And what I'm thinking about is as we refine our strategic plan and performance outcomes, objectives and performance outcomes and that kind of thing, I think this ties more correctly into the overall performance and things that we need to be aware of. I don't know if this is going to move down, for example, use of force. I don't know what the causes are necessarily, but I think it's something that is very operational in nature and has a certain amount of risk associated with it.
Can I suggest that a motion would be appropriate, that a motion to receive the report and that future reporting on use of force be listed as discussion item on agendas going forward, something along those lines.
I agree with what you said, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Secretary, did you catch that? Okay. I'll call for other questions on this. Now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question around these statistics. Do we collect these at the end of the year, or do we collect them or when towards evaluating these?
Well, it's through the chair, it'd be the cumulative statistic. So obviously the reports come in at the time of the use of force. So before the officer finishes his or her shift that day, if they used force, they have to submit a use of force report. So we get them on an ongoing basis. They go to our training bureau as well for statistical purposes and for training purposes. And I don't know if you had other comments on that, Jeff, but.
Sorry for clarification. So these stats are accumulated at the time the report is received?
Yeah, so every time we use a use of force report, you have a certain amount of time that you have to submit it, which is basically right away. And then it goes to our training unit, and they keep track of it throughout the entire year in preparation for this report every year.
Okay, so the stat is collected at the time of the occurrence?
Yes.
Okay. Just a further question, Mr. Chair. With these reports, I do appreciate the report and the statistics. Do we understand what sort of alert levels or action levels there should be? Or how do we interpret this?
Well, they're through the chair. I mean, when an incident occurs during a shift and the officer uses force, whatever level this is, he or she submits that report. Supervisor would see that. There'd be probably an arrest report going along with it, describing the activity of the accused person or the suspect that the use of force was used on. So there's a bit of a check and balance there. And then the reports go, all of the use of force reports go to our training bureau, where they can have a more holistic look at all of them and see if there's patterns. And they can also address if maybe you shouldn't have done this, and did you think about doing that? So there are, but that's how our training program is built. And we
they're online.
Yeah, so they're online. Okay. So our training bureau is built to continually look at de-escalation, because we always want the lowest level of force used possible to resolve the situation without injury to the person or the officer, hopefully.
So, for example, 50% is good, 80% is good. How do we?
I'm not sure what the.
So, because there are some percentages around the different type of use of force, which percentages? I would not know if something is good or bad, or something is action.
Yeah, I don't think you can look at. I think you have to look at every incident and decide that the level of force used was appropriate or not appropriate. You can't say that firearms should be used 50% of the time, because you might have a month where no firearm should ever be used, and where just soft hand techniques, handcuffing somebody is all you need. So the percentages of what weapon of choice is used is determined by the situation that the officers had to address. So I think you'll see trends. I don't think you'll see.
So that's what I'm looking at. Is trends. Are you looking at trends at the time? For example, to date, this is March, we had an increase in certain type of use of force. And so do we have to take some action? Or do we wait until the end of the year and say, oh, okay, we've done this a lot more, and so we need to take action?
Yeah, no, I think the important point is that every incident is looked at, and it's only the incident in and of itself that would be reviewed, and somebody would say it's right, or it was really well handled, or maybe you could have done this. But we haven't had any serious situations which have come to our attention. The most serious, of course, would come to our attention with the use of a firearm or serious injury, and the Special Investigations Unit coming in and laying a charge against an officer because he or she used excessive force. But the percentages are driven by what the incidents are. So if next month we have 10 10% more people armed with firearms and 20% more armed with knives, then the escalation of force will go with those incidents. So it's all incident driven, it's not a statistic where we can say motor vehicle tickets, we'd like to have 10% more. We'd like to have the need for zero use of force, but that's not going to be a reality. There are violent criminals and different situations that have to be addressed with some level of use of force, but that's why the officers go through use of force requalification on all of their different weapons that they have or their open hand techniques every year, so that they're updated and taught new techniques. But the priority is always de-escalation.
If I could just add to that one last thing. So it's to the chief's point about the incident, it's actually driven by the subject. So when you look at how our tactical unit is being used more often, it's because they're completing a fulsome operational plan where threat is identified based on the subject and the scenario. So that would, if it's at a certain level, that determines, okay, because we don't use the TAC team just for everything, it has to be justifiable. So that's why you'll see when we go out and do joint force projects that another service calls and says, hey, we're going to do, you know, a takedown, and we're going to try and do this many houses at the same time, and we believe these people have guns. That's when it's going to justify, okay, we need to do this. So it's based on what the subject does. When you do see the trends, the reason that we see the CEWs or the CEWs somewhat going up and staying low right now versus the use of batons and pepper spray is, as the technology's gotten better with our tasers, using pepper spray in the field it's got some downsides. Like I've been pepper sprayed by accident in the field. You know, it gets sprayed in the wind. Taser, usually, if it works properly, the connection is made, the response is immediate. You don't have to decontaminate the person. As soon as you disengage, it's done. And batons are, you know, only as effective as you use. So you'll see, though, the trend is actually with our de-escalation training that we're doing, and that is the response to what we see. The more de-escalation training we do, you'll see on the front lines that the use of force should go down. And with the use of, and with the CEW being more and more known, people know that we have it now, and they know what it is. It's not a new object anymore. So you'll see when the CEW is being deployed, people realize, okay, I know what that is, and I don't really want to engage in this right now. So.
So I just wanted to add, and I can't get into specifics of this incident, but we had a group of officers making a high-risk arrest where the suspect ended up being the accused person, pointed a live firearm directly at them. They issued commands and arrested that person and did not shoot that person. That's the extreme case where it was still de-escalation. They would have been totally justified in taking that person's life because of the risk that was presented to them, but they de-escalated it, and that's what the training does, and thankfully they're all okay.
Thanks, through your chair. So some of the numbers of the use of force statistics by race also jumped out at me, given our demographics in Halton, and had the chief not made his additional comments, we wouldn't have known any difference. But just ask that those stats be included in our future reports, and it also be nice to see a breakdown of municipalities.
Off the top of my head, I do not think there would be any difference between the municipalities. It'd be interesting if there is, but we could certainly have a look at that.
Right, but you mentioned Mississauga, Brampton, or if you're going up.
Oh, those are really different.
Yeah. So comparison, yeah.
I thought you were meaning between Oakville and Burlington.
No, you mentioned that some arrests are made, for example, by our officers in Peel. So just to understand how many, it was certainly great to hear it from you today, but we can see it in the report going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Fred?
I think one of the key performance metrics, if you will, is really the disposition of investigations or complaints that are initiated because of the use of force. So, you know, ideally, if the officers are exonerated, then it's validating that the de-escalation techniques are working appropriately, right? Regardless of the rates on a month or year basis. Because they they are incident-driven.
That's a very important measure, as is the vast number of cases where the individuals do not complain. Because they either feel they were treated fairly, or they were in the wrong, whatever their thought process may be. But certainly the OIPRD and the SIU are important independent validations of the level of use of force.
Thank you, Kurt.
And just to follow up, a couple of points really. I mean, one of the things that I look at in this kind of report is, and I understand and I applaud the service that no one's hurt throughout this year, and in the face of 400 and whatever it is number of times that use of force was present. But it makes me wonder a little bit about the adequacy of our tools, training obviously, but the adequacy of our tools too, right? And I think we have good tools. But we have talked a little bit about body-worn cameras, and I suppose we'll be talking about that again down the road. But I wonder sometimes whether, knowledge of body-worn cameras and the camera present and the camera looking into the person that is aggressive, what impact over time that might have. And so there's a number of reasons that I think about this kind of thing, right? It's not just that the numbers have gone up, it's kind of like what's behind the numbers going up on one hand, but on the other hand, is there better use of tools or better tools or whatever that might have an impact on some of it over time. The last comment that I wanted to make, Mr. Chair, is, being mindful, I don't want to create more work for the service, but this report could be combined with the performance report to make it a more wholesome performance report rather than separate. I just throw that out for consideration. I know we already made the motion. However,
If I could build on that, Mr. Chair. Sure. That's kind of what I was getting to in combining this also with the SIU and complaints ones as well. There's some tie-ins here that perhaps we can explore how to raise the bar to another level in terms of this reporting significant information to the board. You see what we're saying? There's a tie-in between use of force, performance, public complaints,
tools, adequacy of our tools.
and health and safety report. There's possibly a tie-in too, but we don't know that because we're siloing them right now.
Through the chair, I think they're all of those reports and others are indicators of performance. But whether you want them all wrapped up in a 200-page report or separated out and consider them as performances, I think the report itself would basically be the same, even if it was contained within a larger report. So I don't disagree with it being performance, certainly, and it's a good point being raised, but also a use of force, I think, is enough of a priority in the eyes of citizens, and certainly for the board and for police services, that it's almost important enough to be looked at as an issue itself. So either way works for us.
So I have a couple of questions and then a comment before we take a vote. The first one is, and this follows up on what Pav suggested in terms of further information about Halton region use of force statistics. And so the question is, can we break out specifically when you report on the various use of force activities, can you break out when they are based on Halton region and when they are being done in coordination with another service so we can determine our own statistics versus another region's statistics?
I believe we can break out when the arrest or the use of force is used out of our jurisdiction, usually with the attack team or a special unit, drug unit making a high-risk arrest. And I believe we can break out when individuals are arrested and use of force is used in the region of Halton if the individual is from outside of Halton.
That'd be useful.
That's an interesting scenario because a lot of people we deal with, whether it's use of force guns and gangs, drugs, or just everyday car accidents, a lot of people are not from home. Just a quick scenario, but we looked at that in the smaller city of Belleville when I was there, because it was the center of the universe in that part of Ontario. I think it was 43% of every person the police service dealt with. We had students come in all one summer, look at every occurrence report, every traffic ticket, every arrest. 43% were not from Belleville. But the budget was based on Belleville and the population of Belleville, but the workload was much higher because of the influx. So the city of Toronto, pre or post-COVID, has this huge influx of all sorts of things that they deal with. It's not just Toronto. And we also do too. We're the center of everything going through here and human trafficking. And so there's no end of what we could try to break down Halton residences versus non-Halton residents. But I think in this case, it would be fairly simple for us to do.
Yeah, I think when, it would be my impression, certainly as a citizen myself, when I look at statistics like this, I'd like to know what the impact is on, not just economically or from a human capital perspective, but on the crime severity within our region itself. We pride ourselves on that excellent statistic every year. So we can look at that number and say that, pistols were drawn 50 times, but only, I'm just pulling this number out of my hat, only, 22 of them were within the region of Halton. That would probably I would imagine, certainly give me more comfort for myself and my family. I'm sure that would inure to other members of the community as well.
I'm sure we could do that.
Great. On that note, in terms of the firearms, 50 occasions of a pistol drawn, 9 times discharged, etc. Do these numbers also include actions taken outside of our region, correct? Yes. Is there an opportunity to see the statistics from other comparator services, so we have a metric we can look at to say how well we're doing in terms of increases, decreases, etc.? Because I know that these are published provincially.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity to actually provide benchmarks so that we can actually see how well we're doing or not?
Yeah, I'm not sure if other services reported in their public session, then they'd probably be available to the board through the board's websites, and we could look at that. The OEPSB could collect something like that if they wanted to as well. If different services, I don't know why a service would or even would be able to report this in camera if they do. If it's in camera in some other jurisdiction, it might be problematic to try to get it.
But is it collated by the SolGen staff for any purposes? Do they publish a report?
Well, this is sort of the first year that every service has been required to try to get some race statistics for this, right? So I'm not sure what the SolGen will do with that.
We could definitely see this being part of the Solicitor General's purview, or the Inspector General in the future,
Whenever they find that person.
Actually stand up. It's searchable right now, but whatever.
Can we potentially take that as direction that for the next report that we look at that as an opportunity to report out that information if it's available?
Through the chair, I believe the ministry rep is on the line. I don't know if they have a comment on what's happening with the collection of data.
Is the zone advisor with us? Would he be muted?
I think he's popping on now.
Ron's there.
Yeah, I'm here. Not sure why my camera's not coming up. So the work is ongoing. We're anticipating that we'll see some significant movement in the late fall. We do have a division that is doing data management, and how that is going to play out, I can't really comment at this time, but the work is ongoing.
That's great. So we can have a look at that, whether that's available next time or not. And I see that Clark's hand is up. I'm sorry that I missed you, Clark, if I missed you earlier. The monitor is quite far away, so I'm getting used to which monitor to look at. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I guess Don and I are in, we're in the cheap seats here, because we get to hear part of it. Two things. It is, and I guess it's a question to the chief. is it standard how this is reported across the province? Because if we went to look at statistics from other services, would they look different with how they have reported it out, or is it pretty well standard across the province? To be able to compare apples to apples.
No, that should be standard.
Thank you. And I guess the other question I would have a request is that, especially for those of us trying to listen virtually, is if people could speak up a little bit, because some of them are very low speaking and it makes it hard to hear the questions, and you kind of have to ascertain what the answers are. So that's for all of you there, just to try to do that a little bit. I know it's difficult because some of us are in the room and some of us are not, but it would be appreciated. Thank you.
On a technical note, I'm wondering to our technician if we can raise the gain on the mics at all, so that perhaps they can be more sensitive to pick up.
If you raise it too much, so Mr. Chair, you pick up every paper rustle anyways. It's just when people are asking questions or comments.
There'll always be a compromise.
The microphones are above your head. They're in the ceiling.
Speak to the ceiling. Look up and speak. Yeah. And I just had one comment. Kurt's, I think it was Kurt, suggested the idea of potentially encapsulating this within the greater overall service report. I don't have a dramatic disagreement with that, but I do believe, and I believe that she touched on this. I think that the importance of use of force is so important that I believe that it deserves being highlighted. So if we were to combine it in a more omnibus or comprehensive report, I would certainly want to make sure that it is clearly drawn out and not simply lost within other statistics. The fact that it would show up on the agenda as a specific item, and I agree with you 100% that it should be on discussion, but the fact that it shows up as a specific item, I think draws attention to the importance both the service puts on this as well as the board itself, that it is such an important issue that we need to stand up. Thank you. I didn't mean to argue you down on that. No. That's my viewpoint. And I just have a question regarding nomenclature. ARWEN pointed and discharged. What's ARWEN?
R1, it's a weapon that our tactical team has, which fires a less lethal rounds. Basically, think of it as a rubber bullet type of weapon.
And on that note, what's a less lethal? Can't speak this morning. What's a less lethal shotgun pointed and less lethal shotgun deployed? Because those are separate from the R1.
Yeah, we've a number of years ago we went to C8s, which are a very popular rifle for police use, much more accurate than shotguns, and shotguns have been turned into where they're not used to fire a typical shotgun round or shot out of a shotgun. There is a less lethal type of round which could be put into the shotgun, so that the shotgun can be used to fire the less lethal dischargeable item.
So a decision's made in the field as to what type of ammunition to use within the weapon?
Well, certainly, I mean, I can go back a long time to my tactical days, but you can't just go to less lethal if the situation facing you is lethal. So that's why those, the R1 is a weapon that's only used by our tactical team, because if they're facing a person who is armed, they may choose to try to use the R1, but they have to have another officer or officers there with actual firearms in case the R1 doesn't work or the taser doesn't work. So there has to be multiple levels in those situations when we have time to have the tactical team there.
Okay, and last question I have for you, I apologize for this just try to understand from a civilian perspective. When you are listing canine under use of force, that is when a canine is specifically ordered to, I don't know if I want to use the word attack, but what's the appropriate age? Engage, thank you. Is that when that is referenced in this report, or is it just when the canine is used in a circumstance?
Well, would not include when the canine's tracking a missing elderly person, but if you think of a dangerous situation or a high-risk arrest, You could also think of that actual canine, the actual dog being the equivalent of a weapon.
So if the dog, that's probably where, the dog is simply there barking and showing his presence or her presence. Is that considered a deployment of use of force, or is it when the dog is actually engaged in?
I think when the dog is actually engaged, like it's fight.
I was actually surprised at the few number of the few times that was actually engaged in that report, so that makes it clear why that is the case.
Our dogs are also trained in de-escalation.
Yes.
And they're on a leash.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That was a great discussion. Can I get a motion? And the motion, I'll ask Kurt for the motion. The motion is to receive, and also that the future use of force reports be listed on the agenda under discussion. That's the motion. Are you so made? Thank you. Can I get a seconder for that motion, please? And she's seconding it. Pat is seconding it. It's on the floor. Chief, did you have a comment before we vote?
After the vote.
Okay, super. Any further comments or questions on this motion? On screen, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So I think you're the only one with the longevity on the board that you went through some use of force experience with our trainers a number of years ago. It would be a great exercise for the board members to see some of the use of force and the techniques and what the officers are trained in the not too distant future. It might be with your schedules, it might be easier to do as part of a board retreat type of thing, as a learning type of experience, but and also a tour of our tactical area, actually see what the R1 looks like. And different things as well, and you could volunteer to be tasered.
I tased last time. I wasn't tased. I think it's a wonderful idea. Actually, probably a workshop or a in-service session where we could do that, but also potentially show members of the board who have been, some of them appointed during or just before this pandemic, can actually see our facilities here. Because I know that, again, I've been on board for a little while. I've seen the building from the point of it being blocks in the ground to, I don't think most of the rest of the board has seen it, so it'd be good to provide that context. Perhaps, Mr. CGO, could you coordinate that for us?
Yes, so I'll pass that right on to the secretary.
Thank you. And I was referring to you corporately.
Yeah, we schedule those workshops anyhow, so this will be part of the mix.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to 3.4, and that is police vehicle collision summary. I don't remember who asked to list that.
I didn't.
Okay, there, go for it.
I'm the culprit, sorry.
You want to say culprit at a police board meeting?
I mean, considering the mileage that's driven or the kilometers that are driven, I think the number of accidents are quite low, but it is up a tick over this last, and I'm just wondering if you can make a comment in that regard. Damage is about the same, so it seems a little unusual to me to have collisions up, but damage about the same.
So to cover that off, you see a lot of the accidents are people backing over things and hitting those type of hitting signs and not giving proper clearance. So this year we've actually prepared for block training. So last year our members went through kind of an online training, and this year we've actually rented out I think it's Flamborough Racetrack, where we're actually going to have our members on the track, and we're going to be going through all the different things, reversing, parking, following distance driving conditions, and actually doing the physical onboard training so that people can get those practices up and get their skills up. We haven't done that for a while. Typically, sometimes when you come back from OPC, you get it a lot, 3 months worth when you're at OPC, but then you come here, it's a couple months. And if you're not used to a car that's got a little bigger than maybe you've driven in the past, I can see how some of these things happen. So we're going to make sure that the entire service goes through. The three of us are actually going to be going for the first day as well. The chief doesn't back over me in the underground. And so then the other part of it is whenever we do have an accident,
It should happen at some point.
Usually you're vandalizing my car, but not backing over. The other part of it is when we do have an accident, there is a review committee that reviews it, part of our training, our fleet management, and they look at it, and if it's something that immediately jumps out, this kind of goes to the point you'd asked about use of force, if something immediately jumps out, like, okay, this person needs some remedial training right now, we've got a member in our training department who specializes in this, and they will set up a specialized training package for that person, have them go out and make sure that they're set up, and it's all documented and reviewed, and we cover that part off. So we don't just wait. If there's something that needs to be done, we deal with it then.
Way back in my day of policing, which was a long time ago, accidents were categorized A, B, C, D, E, F, and in an F category accident, the member actually had to pay the damage. And I'm sure that's gone by the way a long time ago. But I think one of the things that we discovered way back then was that certain people seem to have more accidents than others. Some people seem to be more accident prone, and then there was a remedial training program in those instances. Is that the situation?
There's also a discipline component to this, so we do keep track of how many accidents you've been in, and if it is what we would call an at-fault accident, progressive discipline will kick in. So, if you're at your third accident in, a 5-year period, then you're going to start seeing some discipline applied to you because of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything further on this item? I ask you for a motion to receive. Thank you. Seconded by Nav. Thank you very much. I don't see any questions on the Zoom, so I'll ask you to vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. 3.5, communications update. Did somebody separate that? No. I'll just talk.
I will say that we're now, the governance calendar, you'll see we've moved this to semi-annually.
Yeah.
It was Dawn.
Okay, Dawn, sorry. Did you have a question, sir? You're muted, sir. Dawn?
Can't hear you.
Dawn, you're muted, sir.
How's that?
There you go.
We got contact. Very quickly, I think the numbers look great. I don't really know what to compare them to personally myself. I know we've talked to in the past. Looking forward to some flow chart year to date that we can start tracking this. I'm sure we have that statistics available to us. I mean, the open rate just on the newsletter knocks my socks off, pardon the expression, but if the industry average is 30%, we're getting 64.5. I think that speaks for itself. And I know that looking back on some of the action registries from the past, that Kimberly is working with our CGO on giving us to develop a result-based performance objectives reporting to the metrics of the board's communication program. So we look forward to that. But in the meantime, if it could be a year-to-date statistic that I'm sure that we have, just to give us some guidance that we're in the right direction. Kimberly?
Yes, absolutely. I can prepare something that'll show us where we've come from the beginning. I have all those statistics available, so certainly I can provide that for our next meeting.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn.
Thanks, Dawn. Kimberly, could I just ask, how many subscribers do we have to the newsletter? I see what our open rate is, but I'm just curious, how many people are actually receiving it?
We're just over 70 subscribers currently.
Okay, is there anything further on this item? Can I get a motion to receive? Don, you were the main questioner. Would you give me the motion to receive? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Ingrid. Any further comments or questions? I'm not seeing any before I call the vote. I just want to say thank you to Kimberly for your hard work on this. It's nice to see those numbers continually racking up, and I think it's been very effective. So thank you very much. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, members of the board, I want to draw your attention to the discussion items starting with 4.1. That's the proposed policy for governance commitments. Mr. CGO, do you want to?
Sure. This was a change we talked about Thursday or Friday at the workshop. It was clarifying what the board's main interests in reports from the service are.
Okay, it's relatively self-explanatory. Are there any questions about this at all? Can I get a motion to approve? Thank you, Ingrid. Seconded by Pav. Further comments or questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 4.2, financial conditions and activities policy. Fred?
So this particular policy replaces 2 bylaws and 3 existing policies, including one of the same title. It's been through about half a year of development, and it may or may not be spot on at this point. We've moved the reporting into the existing policy GO7 governance calendar, along with a couple other items from last month. You'll see there track changes on that addition. In the financial conditions and activities, all of management's proposals have been included, save for one. And I've tried to find a compromise position between the board's comments last budget session and the traditional way of approaching it, so that we can satisfy the board's information needs without being overly prescriptive.
Okay. Comments or questions? I do have one comment on it. The room first. Oh, looks. Have we lost Don and Clark? Oh, Don's still there. He's just.
Clark's video is off. He's still here.
Okay, super. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'll raise mine. So 5.2 is one of the chief's duties. Boy, he gets a lot of duties. Wow. Long list. This one, though, in particular, is submit the board-approved annual operating budget along with approved governance budget, capital budget, and capital forecast regional council. So my question / comment is more a matter of semantics than practicality. But if the board is attempting to clarify the board's role versus the services role, I'm just wondering if this one is maybe not appropriate, in the sense that if it's the board's budget, the staff prepared the budget, and the board approved it, should it not be the board submitting it to regional council? Regional council is a political body. I know that practically we're submitting it to staff, but I mean, I think from a perspective of the actual semantics of the process, vis-a-vis our responsibilities, I feel that it should be the board should be presenting it. And I guess by virtue of that, through our the CGO would ultimately present it. But I'm just wondering if that's something we want to change. Not that it would change anything practically, but from a governance perspective and from a clearly identifying the who is responsible perspective, I think my opinion is that that should be clarified.
Okay. Paul, maybe you can, maybe the finance officer can explain the actual submission process.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a great suggestion. I think 5.2 could be stated as we submit to regional staff our approved budget. And perhaps 5.2A or B is that the presentation of regional council is led by the board and chief. Yeah, does that capture what you're looking for?
I'm not as worried about the presentation as I am about submission. So I'm sorry, I'm a little pedantic, and it's but we're trying to clearly delineate roles in our governance exercise here. We're responsible for this, they're responsible for that, and making sure that everything dovetails. The presentation, like the actual presentation, is usually the chair and the chief, and that's fine. I don't think that has to be detailed in the report. It's the act of actually submitting an approved report to regional council. I think this needs to be clarified. That's chief.
Well, I mean, 5.2, because it's under the chief of police shall. If it was all the same as it is there, but after capital forecast to the police services board, so it's not the approved budget. I need to submit the annual operating budget along with the approved governance budget, capital budget, and capital forecast to the board. And then you could have 5.2 subsection A, the board submits the approved budget to regional council.
So I'll turn it off if nobody else thinks that this is a worthy area to delve into. But I'm wondering, hold on 1 second. My suggestion would be that if, instead of drafting this on the fly, if we were to send this back to Fred to have him potentially do a little bit of wordsmithing, and bring it back next time. That would be useful. Sure. That'd be my suggestion. Yeah, Fred, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but what your thoughts?
No, I'll take them offline. I think we can find how we can delineate those responsibilities in this document without unduly complicating the administrative post office.
That's my goal. Yeah, that's what I'd like to do. Yeah. Is that okay with the board? Anybody objecting to that? Okay. Can I get a motion then to defer the matter to the April cycle of the police board agenda? Thank you, Nav. Seconded by Kurt. Thank you very much. Any further discussion, comments? All in favor? That matter's deferred. Thank you. Thanks for your indulgence, everybody. I just want to make sure that we're following our own wishes here to clearly delineate the board versus service responsibilities. 4.3 is the annual performance report. Oh, I'm sorry. We still have to deal with GO7. I think we just approved it. But were there any questions on the governance calendar?
It's part of the same. Yeah, it's under the same cover.
Yeah. So I think we just approved it. Oh no, we didn't approve it. We just deferred it as well.
It's up to you whether you want to defer that or pass that.
Does anybody have an objection to approving the governance calendar? Can I get, now would you give me a motion to approve policy GO7, governance calendar?
Please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder to that? That would be Ingrid. And just for clarification, Graham, would you mind noting that deferral reflects only proposed AO3? Thank you. Further comments or questions on the governance calendar? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everybody. 4.3, the annual performance report. Mr. Chief, would you like to frame that one, or?
You know what, statistically, numbers are up and down in different areas. We're looking at the ongoing impacts of COVID. Some of the offenses are violent, person-to-person offenses are down. Our property crimes are up. We've had 2 years of, we were just talking about this 2 days ago, we've had 2 years of people committing crimes with masks. So it's kind of interesting. Like 10 years ago, if you went into a store with a mask on, people would have reacted differently. Now we've got videos of people doing shoplifting, and they've got the benefit of wearing masks. And but we also have things that have changed in the court system, where courts went virtual and fail to appears are up, but charges for fail to appears are down because courts are dealing with things differently. We have checked in with only a couple of other services, and we think the trends are somewhat the same. Our clearance rate is down, but we think that's going to also be the same probably across the board. So we'll wait to see how we compare on some of those things. But a lot of work, obviously, that goes on to generate these statistics on the work side of actually making the arrests and clearing the crimes. And as always, the most serious crimes are being solved. We have a number of very major investigations on the go right now, continuing the homicides and different things. So it has been another very busy year. But we do believe that statistically, from a crime severity index and otherwise, we are going to continue to fare very well.
Questions, Ingrid? And now?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one thing that I saw as I reviewed the report is, reflecting back on our February board meeting, there was quite a robust discussion about hate crime here in Halton. And the question that I have is, where do I find that, the hate crime statistics, in this particular report? Because I don't see any specific reference to it. And there was some concern expressed by the board members how it's affecting certain districts, whether it's Oakville or Milton or Burlington.
Yeah, it's probably through the chair. Another good example of when a certain issue is of enough importance, it gets reported separately. Here it would be in other crimes, in the larger picture of the thousands of crimes that happen. But we do that separate report because it is such a priority for us.
So it wouldn't be part of this report?
The numbers would.
Yeah,
I mean, if there were 100 hate crimes, that number 100 would be in these statistics, but it would be in the other, like other criminal code sort of area.
Mischief, assaults, things of that nature.
Because it is on the rise throughout Canada.
I believe it is on the rise throughout Canada and around the world, and I mean, anti-Semitism is a big part of that, but also hate crimes towards the different diverse groups within communities. We've looked at, you know, it's a complicated thing because there are some very terrible things that go on that, in relation to individuals, diverse or LGBTQ or otherwise. And sometimes it does not reach the level of what the criminal code says is a crime. I'm trying to think and had some discussions with Ken offline. Would it be possible for the province to have some sort of a provincial hate type of thing where someone says this terrible thing to an individual? Is it something, right? Something less than the criminal code, but it's very complicated. But there are a number of incidents, certainly. And we had, as we talked about in February, during some of the Pride celebrations, there were a number of Pride flags stolen, which were all individual incidents. Mm-hmm. They were, I think, in that case, there were two young kids, not really realizing the seriousness of what they did, but they were still incidents.
Yeah, society is suffering from the lack of definition. You know, it has a fairly broad range. It's hard to pinpoint it exactly what constitutes a hate crime.
That was, what you were just referring to was your suggestion around creating a Provincial Offences Act charge. Is that what you meant just a moment ago?
I've been giving some thought to that. It's very complicated though.
Okay. I'd be curious to know more about that thought.
Well, you know, you can't trespass on someone's property and drive without a license. Why can you say certain things that ought to be known as wrong?
Certainly be a useful tool. That's for certain.
But as my legal advisor says, it's complicated.
That's what legal advisors are supposed to say. And now, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question around the uptick on the auto theft. I understand there was one just the other day, just 1 kilometer from Lakeshore. Could we get an understanding of what are the preventative measures that are being taken?
That in the carjacking, or which is different type of auto theft, but do you want to talk to those who
go in camera? Sorry, go in camera on that?
On that particular case, we wouldn't talk about here.
In general.
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, high-end vehicle thefts are up, and it's because you can do them a couple of different ways. Relays, you can steal the signal from the key fobs within people's houses and drive away with the car. It sometimes surprises me that the auto industry can't solve that. Some sort of, we need dual authentication to sign into our computer, but I can drive your Lexus away if I have the right equipment. And there's insurance issues to that, and there's, I guess, every time a Lexus gets stolen and shipped to some foreign land, another Lexus gets sold. So maybe there's reasons why things aren't solved. But it's also organized crime that are doing a lot of those thefts. And then we have, in some instances, young, violent criminals who are stealing people's vehicles with violence. So we won't talk about specific incidents, but those certainly are happening. Sometimes, a couple of years ago, where there were, we had a couple of Range Rovers where the people would drive, gently bump into the back of the car, and the person would get out. Another person would steal that car, and they both drive off. And then there's some that are being done with extreme violence. Those are very worrisome to us, certainly.
So just a clarification on preventative measures. What are we doing in terms of supporting the community, either communicating or, what are the kind of things that we're doing when we're looking at investigating these issues, and what are common themes, trends?
Yeah, well, I think Raj has a comment, but also when you come to some of these violent situations, you can't necessarily prevent them, but arrests and putting people in jail is also crime prevention. We've got to arrest them when they've done one, so they're not doing 10 more. And so good, solid police work is also crime prevention. It's very hard because they're so random. You could put messages out and say, please be concerned that someone may rob you of your vehicle. It's apt not to happen, but it does happen. But those things are in the media. Hopefully, in the not too distant future, the arrests in some of those incidents will also be in the media.
To the chair, that this is organized crime, certainly organized back to 2019, the huge volume of break-and enters, residential break-and enters. The pandemic hits, now everyone's working from home. Criminality still needs to thrive, and they kind of morph their crime pattern towards vehicles. And so what we've seen is this organized, approach to stealing vehicles by order. So there are specific cars that are being targeted. We know this. If you look at our social media profiles, our collaborative joint forces operations, we are communicating that in the media, social media, reaching out to car dealerships, car manufacturers to get the word to buyers to say that your vehicle is a prime vehicle for theft. What you can do, we actually have done a number of things through our corporate communications and through other media outlets to ensure that people know that this is a shared responsibility. If you can park your vehicle in a garage, that hardens the target. If you can use a club, the old club that used to buy in the 80s and 90s, that's actually a great deterrent because a lot of people don't bring hacksaws to cut your steering wheel anymore to get that device off. We have, through the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, lobbied car manufacturers to look at the way that they develop their onboard computer systems, because that is what actually is being tricked, to either relay the signal to start your vehicle or to reprogram the key fob. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to do is say, listen, this is a shared responsibility. The owner has something to do. We certainly can do proactive measures and communication pieces, but the auto industry has a significant opportunity to change the way they do business. However, if someone's car gets stolen and it's a write-off or gets shipped overseas, someone's going to come back and buy another car, and there's a business element for them. So it's complex, it's frustrating. What you see too is these vehicles being involved in pursuits, which is a significant public safety piece for us. We don't want to engage in pursuits. We want to make sure that we, try to contain, the situation and the volatility of these crimes. And so, our members are trained in terms of how we undertake alternate measures for stopping vehicles, blocking off communities, identifying the need to have additional officers before you actually turn your lights on and try to stop the vehicle. So we're doing our part. We are involved in a number of joint forces types of operations to address these types of crimes, and it really is a collaborative effort to tackle this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kurt.
Just a comment. I've heard the words organized crime a couple of times, and I really do think it's the tentacles of organized crime that are reaching into our communities, and in some ways that's very understandable. But I think we as a board need to take cognizance that this sends me a message, and I trust the board a message that we need to make sure that the budgeting for the service is adequate to take on the organized crime changes that we're seeing, that our tools and training are adequate, and those kinds of things. I read a message, or my wife read a message, or I think it was yesterday, that 100 vehicles had been stolen in Halton in the month of March. And I don't know if that was accurate, but that's a lot of vehicles, and chances are they were fairly high-end vehicles. I think we live in a region of opportunity in that regard, and that the category of vehicle that's parked is probably above average. But having said that, I think the bottom line here is that this is organized crime at work, and we need to just take cognizance of that and the likely impact it will have going forward.
Thank you, Kurt. I just want to draw your attention to, if you haven't already seen it, and I know it's been done a few times in the past, but recently Councillor Parmar, the councillor, not the board member, held a constituency a town hall meeting on policing and crime prevention and public safety. And it was excellent. On Wright as inspector. I just inadvertently gave him a promotion.
He deserves it.
Yeah, it's true, he's a good guy. Staff Sergeant Ron Wright gave an excellent overview of preventative measures around protecting your vehicle. It's been recorded, and I believe if you could let us know where they can find it if they want to see it in replay.
Yeah, I think it is on Town of Oakville or the mayor's YouTube channel.
Okay.
So I will confirm.
Yeah. And it's excellent, and I think that the more of those sorts of things we can do, the better, because it's surprising how many of these, although, the technology is easy to fool, I heard things as simple as keeping the key fob away from the front door can have an impact on the ability to be able to grab these cars. So I think getting more of the information out there on a pedestrian level like that would be very useful. But I commend everybody, if you're watching, at home and you want to learn more about this, check out the town hall that Councillor Harmar had put on. It was quite useful with the information provided by Ron Wright. I'm sorry, Chief.
Well, I was only going to say also our corporate communications team put a lot of information out on social media. We're approaching 100,000 followers on Twitter, and LinkedIn is really taking off as well. So a lot of crime prevention messaging is going out, including the vehicles and fentanyl. And right now, a dangerous fentanyl that's around. So that's another avenue where the public can become educated as that continues to grow.
It might be useful at some point to have somebody like Ron or somebody else actually do a videotape presentation, or I guess that's an old term, videotape, but a film presentation to put on in our social media instead of just having a few sentences, 140 characters or a couple paragraphs to actually talk about it, because I found that presentation eye-opening, and it might be a useful exercise, particularly in light of that statistic, because we're seeing such growth in that area. Deputy?
We do have that material, and we can just kind of bring it to the top of the inbox. You will push it out again on our social media channel.
Yeah, that'd be great. And maybe just send it out to all the board members too, and we can push it out in our channels as well and just get that information out there.
I wish every high-end vehicle could be shut down remotely after it's stolen.
Well, they can be tracked for sure.
Some can, yeah.
Yes, especially the,
I was sorry to jump into this, but I figure the technology's got to be available, right?
You can do it sometimes through OnStar. They can actually shut the vehicle down.
I know I drive a Tesla, and that can be shut down remotely. I know that, yeah. Not that it's ever happened to me.
so not the electric, but the other vehicles are more prone.
I'm sorry?
Not the electric, but the other vehicles are more prone. The electric ones can be tracked. They can be stolen, but they can be tracked.
I have a PIN code on mine.
Don't charge it very much, and they won't be able to go far.
That's right, just let it die. Kurt. I'm sorry, Kurt. I'm going to put you on simmer for 1 second. I'm having a difficult time seeing my colleagues that have their hands up because the monitor's so far away. So I want to apologize to Clark. He's had his hand up for a while. I'm going to try to remedy this by asking staff to provide me with a small monitor here so I can keep better track of who is remotely participating, because that color blends into the background. So with that explanation and apology, Clark, you have the floor.
Well, that's not good enough, though, Mr. Chair. No, just kidding. I'm glad you finally noticed that us folks here were here. The question I have is actually, and it picks up on what Ingrid asked, is about the hate crime. So I guess the question I would have to the chief is, can that be separated out as a crime that's reported on, just to highlight the heinousness of it, and also so that it's something we can track, because we did have such a good discussion on it last month that it's not something, and when you look in the other category that's listed, when you go down to the footnote, it doesn't even say as hate crime being included in that one. So is that something that can be pulled out and reported on in this as a separate one?
I mean, we did do through the chair of the separate hate crime report, we could include it as an appendix to the performance report. Separately, and still do it in and of itself.
Yeah, I think it's just, especially if someone, the more we can highlight, crimes like that, the hopefully it gets the message out about it as well. That's the point I'm trying to raise as well. The other point I wanted to make is on the vehicles, and it was raised at the very end there, is I know in my vehicle, I can actually disable it if something, and I can remote start, set off all the alarms and everything if it is stolen, providing I'm willing to buy a subscription for it, and that's the sad part is you have to buy a subscription to be able to do it on a lot of vehicles. And the manufacturers should be pressed to have that as included as just a safety feature, because the more safe and secure a vehicle is, the more likely they're going to be able to sell that vehicle to people who have that as a functionality that they would like to have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Clark. Chief, you have a comment?
Yeah, through the chair. I was just going to say, we have Keith Moore is on the line. I suppose, Keith, when it comes to the actual hate crimes, because this is a crime report, it's the UCR reported that we do through Stats Canada, we could probably include hate crime, but then hate incidents are also separate from that. And that's why we do the separate hate crime, hate incident report. But we could look at putting the hate crime maybe underneath fail to appear. Keith?
Yeah, it can be added for sure. Hate crime, of course, is not a criminal code itself. It doesn't have its own classification. It's added to after review. But obviously, whatever the board wishes to see in this report, and I'll take that direction.
No, that's a good point, because some of the hate crimes would be mischief to property or an assault, so they are already captured. So we have separate hate crime reports.
Correct. That is correct. Yes.
Through the chair, perhaps we could align that hate crime report with the annual performance report in addition to the use of force report, because it just provides context. As you've mentioned, those reports are significant in and of themselves, important for dialogue and board awareness and governance, but having them all presented maybe in the same month at the same meeting gives a better context for that dialogue.
I certainly agree with that, Mr. Chair. That's where I was going.
I would agree too, but as long as we don't end up burying those important statistics within a larger report, that's the only thing I get concerned about. When you present an omnibus statistical report, you often lose the nuances of some of these really important things. So as long as we are clearly identifying it as 3 separate categories, then I think that's okay. We could have statistics fun and spend the entire meeting talking about our performance, but as long as we break it out, that's the only thing I would ask, that we make sure we don't do that.
And the other one would be our annual complaints, right? If you're looking at performance, I mean, you could have 4 or 5 separate reports, maybe commit that February or March timeline. It does take us time to collate those statistics. They're not ready in December. Often we're waiting for some reports to come in, ministerially or nationally. So if you have March timeline or April timeline for all those, would provide a really robust conversation as a board.
Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, a wholesome report does make sense because everything is interrelated. Just when we're talking about the hate crime, everything is interrelated.
I definitely know.
I just wanted to, it's really an us thing to deal with. If we were to do that, I would just have to have a little input on when we do that, because we do, actually, the use of force report, we were actually going to ask to push back even further, because we do get statistics at a specific time that we wait on. So a lot of these statistics don't come in at the same time. So it would just be, we have to push that whole report back if you want a full
Talk about that whole schedule. Yeah, let's, can we assign that to, for you folks to speak with, between Fred and Graham to talk about timing, to make sure it's appropriate both for your needs as well as from the board's cycle of reports. But I just want to emphasize my point earlier. I'm very interested in making sure we're clearly flagging some of those more salient pieces. If we're going to do that on a more omnibus basis, make sure that we're very clearly calling out those specific pieces so we can have that conversation so the public are aware of those. I think those issues that, those are some of the things that I think that our constituents, our customers are looking for. So let's make sure we. Further on this, Kurt?
I made a comment earlier, Mr. Chair, and I'd just like to reinforce it a little bit. I certainly agree with target hardening vehicles or whatever it is. However, I think experience suggests that the criminals are going to keep moving and trying to move ahead of anything that we harden. It takes me back to the comment that I made, around having the resources and the tools to do the job, and that we as a board need to make sure that we're very mindful of that. Thank you.
Can I get a motion to receive the report, and I guess staff can take the appropriate direction from our conversation. Can I get a motion to receive, please? Thank you, Kurt. Seconded by. Thank you, Pav. Any further discussion? I'm not seeing any, so I will call a vote. All in favor? That's carried. And just for the record, in addition to receiving, we're asking staff to coordinate that reporting piece, and I hope we'll get a report back on that in due course. Okay, let's move on to 4.5, which is the Motorola Solutions Limited tendering police mobile radios and MG90 routers. This report is pretty self-explanatory, and I don't think any of us question the need. Kurt, did you have a comment?
Prepared to move it.
Thank you. Is there a seconder to that? Seconder? Thank you, Ingrid.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
We still have 4.4.
I missed 4.4. Oh, I did. Okay, well, let's just take the vote on this, and then we'll go back to 4.4. Thank you very much for that. I have a mover, a seconder. Is there any discussion on the Motorola 4.5? Fred, did you have? No, I have one. Thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. I apologize for that. Let's move back to 4.4. That's the Occupational Health and Safety Report, 2022 Health and Safety Policy Statement. Ingrid, you helped me out on that. Did you have a comment or question?
No, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we address it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Fred, did you have something you wanted to raise on that matter? Yes, please. Okay, go ahead.
So I noticed that there's a fairly large increase in number of lost days. And I also note that there's that 86% of the days lost in 2021 were due to occupational stress injuries. My question is there an intersection between the occupational stress injuries, days lost, and use of force?
I wouldn't say I'm on this one. We haven't had, I don't want to jinx us, we haven't had the, the gas station sort of situation from a couple of years ago where two of our officers were shot and dealing with stress and coming back to work. We haven't had that, thankfully, type of situation in 2021. But what we've talked about, I think, almost every year here and in other jurisdictions is stress is increasing everywhere. And when people go off on stress, whether it's PTSD or it's cumulative stress, whether it's approved by WSIB as PTSD or not, they are long-term. So you can have 3 incidents which are 600 days, if the officers are 700 days in a year, could just be 3 officers that are off because they're off the entire year. And certainly Tracy, our HR director, is here if they had any further comment on what you've been able to look at so far, Tracy.
Yeah, and I think one of it, if you read, thank you, Chief, if you read some of the documents in its entirety, you'll notice that a lot of them are carryover from 2020 into 2021, over half of the lost days. So these occurred actually in 2020 when we look at the pandemic. So to say it's directly related to use of force, there's a lot of elements that are coming into play, but we're actually looking at them going forward as well with the wellness group and putting strategies in place.
I think that's really what the root of my question, but it's public session, so there are other potential root causes that I'd also be curious to know.
The report does, through the chair, the report does speak to the not necessarily use of force, but the cumulative traumatic events, right? And there's a lot of things that you can attribute that to is people's more awareness to get treatment. So they recognize that they're going through trauma, they're more willing to step forward now, so you're going to see the number go up because more people are willing to step up and say, I need help, and then they're going, getting help and getting, the time off that they need.
Thank you. Board members, any comments or questions on this report? Without seeing any, can I get a motion to receive the report, please? Thank you. Moved by Ingrid, seconded by? Thank you, Kurt. Further comments or questions before I call the question? Following the question, those in favor of receipt? And that's carried. Okay, sorry, it's not just receipt, it is that that the chairman can sign the 2022 health and safety policy. Is that understood, Kurt and Ingrid, in your motion? Thank you. That's carried. Now let's move on to sponsorship of the OAPSB Spring Conference and AGM. I figure it's the first time we have an in-person conference is in Toronto.
Could be Halton, hold on.
A little reliant. Does anybody wish to discuss this matter, or are you prepared to move the recommendation? It's pretty much our standard sponsorship that we provide for OAPSB annually anyhow. Can I get a motion then to approve that? Nav, thanks very much. Seconded by? Ingrid, thank you very much. Any comments or questions? On Zoom, okay. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Who's going? Just curious.
I'm sure
You and I.
going.
Yeah, I'm going to be there. Fred's going to be there. Pardon me? To the exotic airport area hotel. Okay, so we'll see. Hopefully, see some of you there. Okay, moving on to operational verbal update. Chief.
Through the chair, I just have one quick one of interest as it relates to our budget. Obviously, this is not something unique to us. January and February. In January, we saw a $54,000 variance in the negative, obviously, based on fuel. February, we also saw $55,000. If it was to continue going down this way, this could affect us by approximately $600,000. So we'll have to see based on what the gas price that we budget on and what the gas price actually is. I'm sure, again, it's not unique to us. The only thing I'd like to mention in regards to that, which kind of leads to the obvious question of what we're doing about it, and I'm not putting this out there as this is the end all be all by any stretch, but it's a good time to bring up that we've just put out 3 utility interceptor hybrids. We've got a new hybrid that went out in February 15th. It's only got 3,000 kilometers on it, so we don't have the results yet. But basically, it's got the same performance expectations of our other hybrids. The second and third are just being built right now, commissioned. We've ordered another 3 for 2022 as well to put out there. We've also got a Camry that we've put out as well. So we're going to be obviously reviewing that through finance and fleet. And then we'll be able to check out the results on that and see what the benefits are, if there's any negatives to doing that.
Thank you. Ingrid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard on the news yesterday that the Windsor Police Force is looking at electric vehicles, changing their entire fleet to electric by this time next year. It has to be a huge expense, and to be able to do it within a year.
Well, especially you have to look at the infrastructure to do that. If you go on fully electric, the charging, I mean, the vehicles the hybrids that we're using, is a much smarter term, but I don't have it. But they're basically recharging, something to do with the braking. So we don't have to have that infrastructure set up. So yeah, they must be putting a lot of infrastructure to go fully electric.
And in terms of size, they're probably half our size.
There's probably about 400 sworn members.
Chris.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the new battery plants are being built in the Windsor area. They're being
Some relationship. Anything further on verbal updates in the public session? Deputy Roger.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to turn the floor over to Bill Payne, Director of IT, to provide a quick update on our recent decision related to our PSBN initiative.
Oh, yes, that's wonderful. Yes, good idea.
Thanks, Deputy, and through the Chair. The board may be aware that Halton is a leader nationally in public safety broadband. We operate our own network here and offer services to other municipalities as well. A huge part of this is the governance that we established under the umbrella of what we call our PSBN Innovation Alliance. We have over 50 corporate and public safety operator members today. We are moving forward quite dramatically with this. We will be providing a full update to the board in April. However, a major milestone has just been reached, a significant amount of advocacy work that's been done by our alliance. And the Public Safety Canada has finally released, after considerable consideration, delay, and collaboration, what is called the TNCO report, a Temporary National Coordinating Office report, which outlines, in short, our model that we have developed, our governance model and our operating model for public safety broadband for Canada. And so this is now opening many other doors for us as we lead this portfolio in Ontario and indeed across the country, with other provinces looking to join now.
Congratulations. That's exciting, and congratulations to you and all your colleagues across the sector for getting us that success. Chief, you had a comment?
Well, thanks, Bill. And it's been a work in progress for years now. This TNCO report took a long time, almost about as long as the pandemic so far, to get that report out and favorable to us, and a great deal of work going on with many organizations, and spearheading that now with our good friends and partners in the field, and ourselves and Phil Srinko, who the board has approved as our consultant on that project for many years. It's a great project. We've also been in very close contact and meetings with the Solicitor General and with the Minister of Infrastructure and others at the provincial level, because it has so many positive potential opportunities provincially for communication and then beyond the province. So great work by a great team.
The effort can't be overstated in terms of how we got here. We've modeled the way. We thank you, the board, for the investment financially to help with our infrastructure, which allows us to prove to stakeholders across this country and even internationally that we can leverage this technology, we can govern it accordingly. So without this decision, we'd be revenue neutral. And so the reality is now that the future is bright. We've got lots of opportunity. We look forward to sharing what those opportunities look like for the board and for this organization as we move forward. And we'll have that in a written format with time for Q&A in April. So we look forward to that. Thank you.
The only other thing is sort of built on Mr. Allen's comment about organized crime will always morph into what works best for it, and the other area is cybercrime, which we have talked about quite a bit here. The board has certainly been supportive, both within the facility here. We need to move some things and some money around to put a full-time coordinated cybercrime unit here together with all of our cybercrime people, but increasingly our investigations are becoming more high-tech. It's not just the old school wiretap authorizations, judicial authorizations, but it's different ways of tracking individuals, tracking devices, and with the judicial authorization to do so, collecting the evidence in these increasingly complex investigations. So great people here, but I think in the future we'll also see, and some organizations already are looking at hiring high-tech civilian sorts of positions, and it will be issues for the policing environment trying to attract and retain people with those sorts of skills, because in some areas we are not competitive from a salary and benefit perspective. Certainly when it comes to some of our information technology specialists, some of our project management people, there's a lot of movement in those industries, and it may take some different way of doing things to attract and retain the talent we're going to need for the future. But we're moving in the right direction and looking forward to that unit being up and running in a more coordinated fashion. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to applaud the creation of the cybersecurity unit. I think it's a tremendous move. I think there may be challenges going forward around resources, but the learning institutions are turning out brilliant young people who are way ahead in some ways, and there may be retention issues. But the FI sector and other sectors have moved down this road through necessity, and I'm sure there are resources out there. Competitiveness might be a challenge, for sure, right? But this is definitely a move in the right direction. And, some of the things that I worry about is the falling behind in some ways. Organized crime doesn't have budget limitations and moves swiftly. It's very mobile. I'm glad to see that we're going down this road because it's going to make a big difference, I think.
I can tell you from the business community's perspective, there's a lot of important issues. This is right up there. As a recent victim myself of a ransomware attack in my private sector business, it is devastating and expensive. And to this day, 5 months later, we're still dealing with the fallout from that. So thank you for the work on this. And I would be very interested to know more about our own hardening and protection of our own resources. That's probably an in-camera kind of conversation later. I wouldn't want to have that in public session because it's obviously security of the service, but that would be a useful thing to know that we've got things under control here too. One of our municipalities was subject of such an attack, and it's getting really close to home. So I would be interested in knowing more about that, perhaps either today or another meeting in a confidential session.
That's certainly on our radar, sir, and we will have something planned likely for a future board meeting so that we have more of a presentation followed by that.
Anything further on verbal updates? Okay. Members of the board, before I get to this, I just draw your attention to the action registry, which is our next matter, public correspondence is the next matter. No, it was action registry. I was right the first time, second guess myself. The action registry, there are 3 items on there. One is due in April, which is the CGO will be auditing Halton happenings. It's due for report in April. In August, we have the board governance expenditure report, so that's on schedule. And 8.1 is a future referral of complaint management to another workshop. We can mention that we had discussed at our last workshop that we're going to try to meet in a workshop session every second month to stay on top of these types of emerging topics. So we will certainly get that on the agenda for the next one. Can I get a motion to receive the, thank you, Kurt, seconded by Pav. Any discussion on the action registry? See none, all in favor, proceed. That's carried. You have your public correspondence, which has been received and filed on our Villa Trust portal. Are there any requests to list anything from the portal, or are we prepared to receive all public correspondence? I get a motion to receive public correspondence, please. Thank you, Ingrid. Seconded by Pat. Thank you very much. Last chance for comments, questions. All in favor? Public correspondence has been received. Members of the board, I want to draw your attention to the fact that we do have one item new business, which was late-breaking budget reallocation issue. You've been, members online have been emailed a copy of it. Members present have a copy in front of them. It is a fairly self-explanatory report. I don't know, did the chief or one of the deputies want to give us a very brief summary of this and answer any questions? No?
We will answer any questions.
Oh, that was no report. But you're prepared to, okay, I got it. Okay, I thought that was being a bit insubordinate.
I think it's fairly self-explanatory, Mr. Chair. I'm prepared to move it.
Thank you. It's been moved. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Ingrid. Further comments or questions? Just one comment. Whoever drafted the report, I know this was emergent, but we want to make sure we try to keep things circulated in advance. I'm looking at you, Paul, so that we have an opportunity to review these things in a more fulsome manner going forward. We do have that reporting schedule, that agenda approval schedule that we want to try to maintain. I understand things are urgent, but we'd appreciate if you could try to keep that flowing on that schedule. That'd be great. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Is there other new business to come before the board in public session today? I'm not seeing any, so I will look for motion to move into a session closed to the public, so we can deal with our confidential agenda. Thank you, Nav, seconded by Kurt. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, so members of the board and to those watching and to staff present, we're moving into a session closed to the public for the purpose of dealing with confidential matters. To the public, this is the end of our public streaming of the board meeting. I want to thank you for participating today. Thank you to the folks that set up the technology for today. They did really well. Thank you for that. I'll certainly be passing on a couple minor notes next time. To the members of the public, we want to thank you for your interest and your participation today. Your viewing and paying attention to what your board is doing just shows your interest in public safety in this community, and we do really appreciate that. Please pass along the fact that we do this to your friends and neighbors and colleagues. We certainly appreciate the participation. So with that, members of the board, I'm going to declare a 10-minute recess. So we'll reconvene at 11:57 approximately. Sorry, 10:57 approximately. That'll be an hour and a bit. So with that, we'll see you back here shortly. And those who are not required for the confidential meeting, please take your absence now, and we'll see you soon.